Welcome to the Nerd Review. This is the show where we talk about movies, TV shows, video games, books, and comic books. You're listening to episode 18, and this is the season finale of season 1. It's also the end of 2022. It is almost 2023. Tomorrow is New Year's Eve, and I thought we would do a review episode. Look back on 2022 and all the different things that I read, watched, all the media that I consumed. So I've compiled all of my statistics from different websites that I like to use, and I've compiled a couple lists here, some statistics, and hopefully some interesting tidbits. I also watched a New Year's-ish movie. I looked up a list of like New Year's movies, and the one that I picked, it was an okay movie. We'll get into that, but it was, funnily enough, it was like New Year's adjacent, and I'll expand on that as well. So let's jump into 2022 year in review. So a little bit about myself, a little bit about the nerd. I like to set goals. You can call them resolutions, goals, whatever you want to call them. I like to set them for myself at the beginning and end of every year. So in 2022, now they're all different kind of goals. So like 2022, they weren't all about media and stuff like that. But this year it was get my driver's license, which I have completed. I will be doing my driving exam next week. So, we'll pat myself on the back with that, starting off the new year, checking off that big box. Some of the other ones were read. This year was read 15 books. The years prior, I've been doing that one for 3 years now. So the year prior was 12 books, and the year before that was also 12 books. The first year I did it, I read 8 books, and then last year I managed to read 13. So this year I pushed it up to 15 books, though I only read 12. I decided to include, I asked some people, I decided to include some of the graphic novels that I read, the omnibus edition. So like we're talking 900 pages of, a graphic novel. It takes a couple hours to read them. So yeah, I read all of that. I also watched, one of them was, I wanted to watch 200 movies. No particular reason on that one. Just, we watch a certain amount of movies. How many can you log in a year? I reached 168 movies watched this year. So I use some different websites. If anybody's interested, you can check out. This isn't a sponsor or anything. One of them's called Letterboxd. It's a great website for just tracking some, if you like statistics, you like, knowing when and, where you watched a movie, and you can give it a little rating and a review. This is something that I started doing a few years ago. And, last year I wanted to see if I could track every movie that I watched in a year. And now I've done that for about 2 to 3 years, and you end up with some interesting statistics, like your favorite director, just through how many movies of theirs you've watched, your favorite actors. Funnily enough, favorite actor, for me it says it's this gentleman, I can't remember his first name, Michael Papajohn, because I've watched 10 of his films, but he's a good actor. He's basically been like an extra or a secondary character in 10 different movies that I've watched, and it was just, and now I know his face and he keeps popping up, and I'm like, oh, there, 11th film that I've seen him in now. And that's something that you find when you use one of these websites like Letterboxd. The one for books I use is Goodreads. That one's probably very popular from Amazon. You can categorize all of your books on different little digital shelves, and you can again write a review, give it 5 stars, and you can track what books you're reading and what books you want to read. And they have their own book challenge that they sponsor. They support and encourage people to read books. And well, I guess they're pushing it a little bit because Amazon does own Kindle, and they probably want people to buy ebooks and use their platform in that form. But I think it's a good effort to get people to read more. So I put on that challenge. I put 15 books, and I got to 12 this year. And so let's talk about the movies and the books that I watched and read this year. I didn't watch the movies. I didn't watch the movies. I failed that joke. I was going to say I didn't watch the books. I read the books, but that book. that book, that joke. Wow, I'm all over the place. Okay, so first movie that I watched in 2022, I watched this with my girlfriend, and I'll give a big shout out to her and a big pat on the back because she watches some terrible movies with me for the sake of, I want to watch it, and she just sits there and is probably a little miserable. But though I think she enjoyed this one more than I did. It was Master of Disguise, early 2000s. It was honestly terrible. I do recall loving it as a kid, though. Arguably one of the worst things I've watched this year, which is saying a lot because I watched freaking Theodore Rex twice for podcast research. Of course, I didn't like it, but they're almost equally terrible. If nobody remembers Master of Disguise, the big turtle guy. I'm going to be a master of disguise. I'm going to be a master of disguise. That movie was a train wreck. Some good actors, some decent actors, but it's definitely a movie for very young kids. And the plot and everything. If you can say that that's a plot, it was quite funny in that regard. Funny in the sense that it didn't have a plot, and everything about it was terrible. That's the only funny part about The Master of Disguise. So those first watched movie. I think we actually watched that like January 1st, 2022, if I'm not mistaken. My most watched movie for 2022 is Little Nicky. I logged it 4 times. I must have watched it 6, 7, 8 times probably. At some point I just stopped logging it. I know that I watched it at least twice when I was doing the Little Nicky episode for the podcast. So definitely more than 4 times. So that's my most watched movie. Movies that came out in 2022 that I most enjoyed, because I saw at one point I was going to see like every movie in theater. I lived maybe 5 minutes from a Cinema Guzzo, if you say it like they do in the commercials, but Cinema Guzzo if you're just gonna read it off Guzzo. And they're not in order. I don't like from when they were released, just this is what I wrote down. This is my order of the ones that I wrote. Sonic 2, I love that. I saw that in theaters. I'm a huge Sonic fan. Ben Schwartz is doing an amazing job as the voice of the big screen Sonic. I think I've seen it twice or 3 times already this year. I'm so excited what they do next. Idris Elba was amazing as Knuckles. I really hope they introduce Shadow. A lot of people are saying that they don't, people don't like Shadow, so or like the execs don't like Shadow, so they're not going to use his character. But hopefully that's not true. Hopefully they will use his character and all the other great characters from Sonic. I remember I did an episode on favorites, and Sonic X, the animated series from the early 2000s on like Fox Box and 4Kids. That was a great Sonic reboot, and I grew up with my uncle's Game Gear. Actually, to go on a little Sonic tangent here, his Sega Game Gear, it was a bit of a hand-me-down, and I played Sonic 2 on that. And I'm actually about to pick up. I have it in my cart on my Xbox for Sonic Frontiers. I just haven't bit the bullet on that one yet, but I'm definitely going to pick that up because it's the first Sonic game that isn't just a like Twitch reaction game on freaking crack where you just have to like button mash the entire time, which is just not up my alley. But I do love the property and I do love Sonic. So Sonic 2 was a great movie, like hands down. It really did build off of Sonic 1, and it introduces Tails and it introduces Knuckles, and I really hope Jim Carrey isn't done with acting. If he is, thank you for a great basically my entire life from like the year I was born all the way up until now. I've loved so many of his movies. So if he really is done with acting, well, thank you for being part of like Sonic and bringing such authenticity to Dr. Robotnik Eggman, because like that was A1, man. That was perfect casting, perfect acting. He played it so well. So if he is done and he's not going to return for a third movie, I hope they do it well. They pay him respect and he can bow out, and let's just move on from there because I'm going on a weird tangent with Sonic. Scream 5 5, the reboot and return to Scream 5, which definitely introduced me to the word and the concept of a requel, because there was literally a part in the movie where they explained what that is. It's a reboot / sequel, whereas like you had prequels before, and apparently requel has been around for a while. The one of the producers for the Hulk, the Edward Norton's Hulk, used the phrase and the word requel for that MCU Hulk movie, because she said it was in a way a reboot and a sequel to the Eric Bana Hulk that they had done previously to this. And you can see certain aspects, like it picks up in the jungle and it's supposed to, in that sense. So in this sense, in the Scream 5, what they did was you have your legacy characters, your OG characters, and then you introduce new characters. And I mean, it's all over the place. Dark Fate, the last Terminator movie, did this. There's the Halloween movies did this. The most recent Halloween trilogy did this. They're all been requels, and in my opinion, Scream 5 did it the best. And Scream 5 kind of had an advantage in the whole meta, breaking the fourth wall, acknowledging that they're in, like, oh, well, if this is a horror movie, we have to abide by the rules of horror movies. So they kind of had that step up, and they really leaned into it in the best way possible, and it really set them up for success. And we have a trailer for Scream 6 now, Scream in New York, which really does look amazing. And I've always been a huge Scream fan, a big fan of Ghostface, so I was very impressed by Scream 5, and so I'm very excited for Scream 6. I think they've done a very good job handing the crown and handing the baton to the next generation, and they just did a really good job on that requel concept. And so the next movie on the list is Everything Everywhere All at Once. They did a phenomenal job on their multiverse concept, the everything bagel of nothingness, the antithesis of the googly eyes, and caring, and being a warrior in a different light, in a different aspect, that you don't have to be aggressive and physically fight your battles and stand by ancient just rules and things that things change, and there's so many things that happen in life. It was such a good metaphorical movie on so many different levels, and such amazing performances from Michelle Yeoh, and I hope I'm pronouncing these names right, but Ki Hugh Kwen and Stephanie Hsu. They were amazing, absolutely amazing. Waymond was my favorite character. I watched the movie like 4 times, and just my favorite character through and through. And then Jamie Lee Curtis was absolutely amazing. The prosthetics that they put on her to make that IRS character was just phenomenal. And the IRS awards that were clearly butt plugs on her desk, which definitely came back. Like, that was I did not expect them to use the butt plugs in such a way. That was very weird. I'm not gonna. I mean, they're butt plugs. You can kind of infer what I'm getting to, but I don't want to give it away, because if you haven't seen the movie, I highly recommend it. You should definitely watch that movie. James Hong is also in the movie. He was the grandfather, Gong Gong, and I absolutely loved him. He's an amazing actor. I loved him in R.I.P.D. as the vessel that everybody sees for Ryan Reynolds. That was just hilarious, and I've always been a big fan of his work, so it's a phenomenal movie. I don't want to spend too much time on every movie on this list, so let's move on to the next movie. And so the next movie on my list that I have from 2022 releases that I really enjoyed is The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, the Nicolas Cage and Pedro Pascal, who are just like 2 of my favorite actors, and Nicolas Cage has really been just hitting it out of the park the last couple of years. He had the Pig movie, and if you're not familiar, Pig is the truffle farmer one. He plays the truffle farmer who has his pig kidnapped, and just an amazing, outstanding performance in that. It's a drama. It was so So well done. And then I mean, that's 2021. I'm just praising Nicolas Cage's recent performances, and probably one of the weirdest from also last year, but still just have to mention it if I'm praising Nicolas Cage, was Willy's Wonderland. If you're not familiar with it, again, I recommend all of these movies, but if you're a Nicolas Cage fan and you haven't been paying attention to some of his more under the radar movies, take a quick peek at his IMDb page, because it is filled with gems. And so his most recent big blockbuster that was, you know, very big in theaters earlier this year. It's amazing how many movies come out in a year. The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, which I almost always butcher when I try to say it off the top of my head. So it almost always comes out like the massive weight of unbearable talent or something like that, instead of the unbearable weight of massive talent, which is the correct placement of all those words. It's hard to explain what the movie is about, honestly, but it does remind me of a previous Nicolas Cage movie adaptation, and it's very similar, and I can't really explain how they're similar, because if I do, it kind of gives away not the plot, but the idea of the newest the movie that came out this year, in 2022, The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. So again, 100% recommend it. Nicolas Cage just gives an amazing performance. He's playing himself, really. So if you've seen the trailers, you know that much. And Pedro Pascal plays this amazing rich philanthropist who wants to get to know Nicolas Cage. He's a big fan of him, and he wants to sell him like a screenplay that he's written. And that is all I'll say about it, because honestly, I really don't want to spoil that movie. If you talk too much about it, you spoil kind of the concept and the idea. Like I was saying, it's a very good movie, though. A Netflix movie, so we'll move on from there. Like I said, there's a few movies on this list, so I don't want to make it 40 minutes of just listing movies here. Was a Netflix movie. The next one was a Netflix movie with Ryan Reynolds, The Adam Project. That was a great sci-fi movie that also had Mark Ruffalo. He was great in that movie as well, and that was a great sci-fi movie that had like time travel and great CGI, great weapons, VFX weapons that were from the future. Basically lightsabers. I like that, and the action sequences were really well done in that too. So that was probably one of my favorite Netflix movies from this year. Which considering how many movies that Netflix makes in a year and the varying quality of those movies, give credit where credit is due. They made a really good sci-fi movie with some really good actors. It's nice seeing Mark Ruffalo outside of the Hulk, though I really did like him in She-Hulk and everything that he did. And it's amazing that I was looking back over all these movies, and it feels like a lot longer ago than 5 or 6 months, however long ago it was when The Adam Project came out, compared to when She-Hulk just came out, or maybe a month ago or so. So much happens in 1 year, and it touches back on what I was saying about how many movies, how many TV shows, all this comes out in 1 year. And it was I really liked The Adam Project. It was a really good sci-fi movie with solid performances from all the actors, and it was a Netflix Netflix gets an A+ on that one. Let's move on. The next movie on the list is Moonfall, from one of my favorite directors, Roland Emmerich. He did freaking Independence Day and The Day After Tomorrow. Unfortunately, he also did Godzilla in 1997, but we forgive him for that, and we've kind of chalked it up that wasn't Godzilla. But Moonfall was really good. It's a disaster movie. It kind of light on that part. I've seen I like in Day After Tomorrow, that part was better. I did prefer the destruction and the way that they went about it, but I won't completely fault them on it. They did a really good job on what they set out to do, and I like the twist. I'm not going to give it away, but if you haven't seen it, watch Moonfall. It's a good twist, good cast too. That's what carries these movies, is a good cast, and this movie has really good VFX, which again is needed. And let's just keep chugging along. If you haven't seen Moonfall, I recommend it. If you haven't seen The Adam Project, I recommend it. Any movie on this list, I recommend it. So just keep that in mind. I saw the Firestarter remake of the Stephen King movie, the Stephen King book that was a movie already and was remade this year. This one starred Zac Efron, who is now old enough to play a dad, which is super weird because I grew up with him in High School Musical and being the 17 again kid in those movies, and I was the same age roughly as Zac Efron, so I think he's a few years older than me, so it's just super weird that he has now been cast and plays the role as the dad with the small child, because it's just reflecting real life, and I'm just oh crap, I'm the dad age now too, like life, man, it's getting real. That was a weird tangent. Firestarter was a good movie. That is the takeaway. So that was just my short list of movies that I really liked. So I watched 168 movies this year. My goal was 200 movies, 168 movies. It adds up to 312 hours of movie watching. And I will add that to books. So let's jump into the books that I read this year. So in 2022, I read 12 books. These weren't books that came out in 2022, so this is a bit of a skewed 2022 review. It's not all things that came out in 2022, but it's what I read this year. I didn't read new books. I just read what was already on my to-read list. So I read 8 novels and 4 graphic novels. So I'm just gonna read the list here of what I read. I read 2 series of books. One was by L.J. Smith, the Dark Vision series. L.J. Smith is the author of The Vampire Diaries as well, the books that were adapted into the series. The series is loosely based on The Vampire Diaries, so if you've watched the series and you're a fan of the series and you like to read books and you're interested in the source material, I do recommend the books because they don't really follow the story at all. They introduce the characters, but the characters were radically changed. Some characters were completely removed. Other characters were designed for just the TV show to have a rounded out cast, and because the producers liked some of the people that had auditioned, mainly Bonnie. She's not really in the books. They changed the characters of Elena. She's not blonde. She's not as self-absorbed as she is in the books. It takes her a bit of time to kind of come out of that shell. They decided to have more of a relatable character in the books when they designed, in the TV show. When they designed the character of Elena for the TV show, they wanted somebody a bit more relatable and somebody that people could attach to and care for easily, so they changed those aspects of her. Also in the book, she's not 100% a lookalike for Catherine. She looks similar to Catherine, but there was differences. In the show, she's 100% doppelganger. So I read The Dark Visions, which is you can see the staples and the main themes of the Vampire Diaries. L.J. Smith, she clearly has an affinity for love triangles and superpowers and having the good brother or the good guy versus the bad guy. And this one was a group of psychics who have different psychic abilities, and they come together under who they think is this benevolent benefactor, and turns out that he actually has evil plans and plots to turn them into psychic assassins. And then after the first book, they spend the next 2 books on the run and on the defense. So I read all 3 of those books. That was the Dark Visions trilogy. I read if it was a duopoly or something, if it's just 2 books, just a small series, 1 and 2. That was the Christopher Moore It's a Dirty Job and Secondhand Souls, the death the Death books. Those were really good. I really enjoyed those. Christopher Moore is an author that actually my girlfriend turned me on to. So again, second shout out for my girlfriend. She loves Christopher Moore books. She's read almost all of his books. I've read these two and the Vampire Trilogy from San Francisco. That I read last year, though. So these were the two that I read this year. I did read the first Vampire Diaries book. That is the other book that I read. And then the last novel that I read this year was the Neil Gaiman American Gods, the first book in that. I actually have the second book right behind me, Anansi Boys, but I haven't started that yet. So Neil Gaiman is an amazing author. American Gods was a gripping, powerful novel that really drew me in. The character of Shadow was super well written, and I really enjoyed that book. And actually, I skipped one here. The very first book that I read this year, it's amazing how long a year is when you think about it and how much actually happens in the span of 12 months, was the fifth Redwall book. I did a podcast episode on the Redwall series and all the greatness that is Redwall, and I read the fifth one, Mariel of Redwall. That one took place on like really cool ships, and it was kind of like a pirate adventure, which was really fun. Brian Jacques is an amazing author, and Redwall is like, it's Lord of the Rings, but instead of hobbits and elves and everything, it's all woodland creatures. You can take a listen. I was gonna say take a look, but I decided to say listen. You could check out the Redwall episode if you're interested, or just take a look at Redwall. Netflix actually bought all the rights to the Redwall franchise, all 22 novels, back in 2021, I want to say 2021, 2020. So like we should be hearing news about that any day now, actually. Hopefully I'm gonna be checking out that periodically, so let's look forward to some new Redwall content. So I definitely have more of those books to read. Like I said, I read the fifth book, and there's 22 books, so I have like 17 more books to read, and that was it for novels. Those were the 8 novels that I read, and then I read 4 omnibus graphic novels. If you're familiar with the Mask episode that I did, or the Mask as a property in and of itself, there's the Jim Carrey movie from 1994, 1998. I always forget. But The Mask is actually a graphic novel. The movie from the Jim Carrey movie, the Jim Carrey Cameron Diaz movie, was based on a graphic novel. It's an adaptation of a Dark Horse graphic novel, The Mask, that came out in the 80s. And it had periodic runs through until I think it was late 80s to early 90s. It was considered a miniseries, and then it was reborn again a few more times through the early 2000s. And then most recently, in 2022, actually, there is some new Mask comics, but I didn't get around to reading those ones. I read the Sweet Tooth graphic novel omnibus before the Netflix series, the Sweet Tooth Netflix series, which I never actually finished. The Netflix series, I found they made a lot of changes, and overall some of them just weren't to my liking. But if you're interested in the graphic novel, it's a concluded story. They're not publishing new issues, so if you wanted to, you could pick up the omnibus, which is what I read, and it's a collection of the beginning to the end, so it's all the issues in one published book, basically. You can get the hardcover. I got the digital version, but you could get a physical copy, and it's nice to have on a shelf. It's a pretty big book. It's like over 900. I think it's over 1,000 pages, actually, that one. And the changes for me that turned me off of the Netflix series was they changed one of the main characters. And now I give credit, and I give I don't know what the word would be, allowance, I guess. Like, I don't mind if a director, or for whatever reason they decide to cast or change one of the main characters, you want them to be a woman, or you have some sort of creative purpose for changing a main character or changing the source material. That's what directors are there for. They're there to put creativity and spin on whatever it is, the property that they're producing or they're creating now. But in my opinion, the changes that they made, like directly affect the story in ways that I didn't think made sense. So they made an older character who is supposed to be, experienced and grizzled and understands the world at large and is in a protector's role. And we're talking like pushing 60, the main character, like at least from the rendering, from the drawing, and from what I read in the graphic novel, I inferred that this character would be, and the character's name I can't remember for the life of me, around 60, still in very good shape, very sharp, very fast, very, very muscular still, and in the sense that they're a protector and they're going to protect the main character who was younger. And if you're not familiar with Sweet Tooth, the idea is that these children were born with animal characteristics, and at the same time there was a disease that started affecting only the humans who were already around, the ones who weren't animal, like have these animal properties from birth. So they started to blame this new generation of hybrids for the reason of this disease. And so these children, when they're young and when they're weak, they're sought after. They're trying to be eradicated, but this far in, the humans are dying out. There's not that many of them left. So this child is being protected. I believe the main character, he's around 11, and in the graphic novel, he's found by this older gentleman. Again, I cannot remember the name. It's been a while since I read it. And they changed this character in the Netflix adaptation. It's probably the biggest change. Everything else is very accurate, but the biggest change to this was that they cast a very young gentleman, a great actor, great performance, but he's so young that to me it takes away from the story. He doesn't have the experience or the knowledge that somebody at the age of 60 would have. He doesn't have the same demeanor, the presence that you would expect from somebody who's gone through war and all of these things that have happened in this dystopian world that they live in. And that changed to me. It didn't really, I believe it was for this actor. They liked this young gentleman. They wanted him in the series, so they decided to put him in the lead role. But to me, that really took away from what the story originally was and what they were doing in the graphic novel and what that original narrative was. So to me, that was just unfortunate, and I didn't like that in that Sweet Tooth adaptation. But the graphic novel was really good, so I do recommend that. And the other two, let's keep chugging along here. I'm getting a little sidetracked on a Sweet Tooth tangent here. The other two graphic novels that I read to bring it to a total of 12 books. I count them, like I said, I count the graphic novels because these are omnibuses. They're collections of like 10 to 20 individual issues, so we're talking like 300 to 400 pages, like a lot. It's a substantial amount of reading. The last two was the IDW Ninja Turtles, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles graphic novels, two of the volumes, I think 4 and 5. I've been reading those for a while, but that's what I've been reading lately, and it's a lot of reading. So I looked on the Goodreads website that I mentioned earlier in the episode. It's the one from Amazon. So if you're a part of Amazon, you already have a Goodreads account. You can sign in with your Amazon account, or you can sign in with your Google account. And this isn't a promo for Goodreads. This is just a platform that I use. I like to track the different things that I do throughout the year. I'm somebody that has a journal, and I like to log things. I'm very someone who likes to write it down. We go through so many things in a year. This episode kind of highlights, how many things we watch, how many things we read, all the things we experience, all the things that go on in one year. And in my opinion, if you don't take the time to sit down and write down a few of those things here and there, you forget things. You forget that happened this year, and that you went through this, or you saw that, or this happened. And I make a point of going back and I actually do reread my journals, and I reread my posts and my reviews typically around the end of the year, around this time. So that was part of the reason why I decided to make this episode. And so I love the statistics that you get from this. So like I said, when I did the movies, I watched 168 movies, which was 310 hours of movie watching. So on the Goodreads, it tells you the average amount of books you read. It was a total of 4,735 pages. The average book was 349 pages, and I use an e-reader to read my books, and I have a digital comic books, and I have a digital platform that I read my comic books on, and they give me rough estimates. They tell me how much time I spent on that individual book, and it's anywhere from 8 to 10 hours per book. So I did the math on that. It's about 96 to 120 hours of reading, and if you add that together, you have like 430 something hours just between movies and books. That's how many hours I spent consuming those two types of media. I don't have anything for music. I'll have to check on Amazon if it tallies like the total playtime of your music. That would be interesting. I would love to see that. I would love to see how many hours of music we listen to. That'd be pretty cool. I'll have to check that one out. So let's jump into TV. So I don't have a list of favorite TV because I watch kind of all over the place. I watch a lot of old stuff, episodes here and there. My girlfriend and I were watching Sabrina the Teenage Witch, the original series, not the Netflix series. The original series, much more sitcom style, a lot more lighter in tone, very funny. My aunt, shout out to the aunt, she grew up watching that one. She always loved it. It was always playing in the background. I have some of her VHS tapes that have the TGIF. If you're not familiar with that, it's Thank Goodness or Thank God It's Friday, depending on which version you've heard. And this was a show segment on I can't remember which channel, CBS, WB, whichever one it was, and one of the shows that played was Sabrina the Teenage Witch, and she would record the episode. So I still have a few of those, and I remember watching them when I was younger. And now, it's Paramount Plus, it's CBS, because I answered my own question, because that's where we're watching it now. We're watching it on Paramount Plus. So it was a CBS TV segment called TGIF, which would play on Fridays, and Sabrina the Teenage Witch was part of that segment for a while. So I have those tapes with all those old commercials, and it's a blast from the past. I love watching those. So and like I know we're watching. I definitely okay, there we go. I definitely watched Stranger Things season 4 this year. That was amazing. I looked that up. That's 13 hours long. That was 13 hours of content just in Stranger Things. I watched the newest season of Paradise PD on Netflix, which is a super amazing, super funny, super inappropriate animated series, and I love animated series that just play into and really lean into the crazy violence. And I mean, it's cartoon people being like cut in half, and they're still talking to you after they've been cut in half as if it's perfectly fine. And it's like Family Guy, but like without the FCC, which if you're familiar with Family Guy, you've probably seen the FCC episode. So just think like what they would be able to do if they were on Netflix or a streaming service, and that would be Paradise PD, and it's absolutely hilarious. So that was definitely one that came out. The newest season just came out this month, actually, like December 16th. So I watched that really recently, burned through the entire season. Unfortunately, it was the last season of Paradise PD, but the creators of Paradise PD, they're also the creators of Brickleberry, and they have a new series on Netflix. I just hit my mic stand. They have a new series on Netflix already called Farzar, and it's animated, it's crazy, it's wonky, it's a bit more sci-fi than Paradise PD, and hopefully they'll get the opportunity to finish up their story from Paradise PD, because that was the inclination, or the indication I should say, that they gave at the end of season 4. So that came out literally right at the end of 2022, and that was one of the movies I left off my 2022 appreciation list. If we take a little backtrack here, Avatar. I saw Avatar literally this week. There's always some good movies that come out right at the end of the year. I still haven't seen Black Panther, but I always want to give a shout out to my MCU movies. If we take a little backtrack here, because there's always some extra movies that you forget about. But Avatar 2 definitely is going to be one of the greatest movies that came out in 2022. It just VFX visually movie, and from that point, it's absolutely breathtaking. They've gone above and beyond, just in the same way that the first movie did. They really pushed the needle on what is achievable through VFX, and you're hard pressed. There's no seams in this movie. There's nothing that gives you an uncanny valley feeling. The story was, in my opinion, really strong. I really enjoyed it, and I wasn't that taken with the original Avatar back in 2009. I thought it was an okay movie. It wasn't anything that blew me away, so I had low expectations going into Avatar 2, and I am now blown away by Avatar 2. I thought it was a really good movie, and I enjoyed it more than I enjoyed the first one. So that was one of the movies that I forgot about that did come out in 2022 that I really did enjoy. But let's get it back to TV and move this thing along here on my favorite media things that I've been enjoying in 2022. So I've watched a lot of CSI. We've been doing a CSI binge. I think we've watched 4 entire seasons of CSI. I've been catching up on Blue Bloods, The Flash. I've been catching up on season 8 of The Flash. The season 9 will be coming out, I believe, in February. It's going to be the last season of The Flash. I can't believe The Flash has been going on. I'm saying that the name of that show way too much. I can't believe it's been on for, it has 8 full seasons, and it's going into season 9, almost a decade of The Flash, and Grant Gustin as Barry Allen, and probably one of the best portrayals of Barry Allen. And they've done such a good job of the Arrowverse on the CW. The Justice League that they put together on, if you call it the small screen, or it's the golden age of television in that sense, and they did such a better job. I think the Justice League that they did on the CW is better than Zack Snyder's Justice League. I'll throw down my gauntlet and make that assertion any time of day. So I've been just a lot of shows. I watch old stuff, like a bunch of episodes of Friends and stuff, but that was pretty much it from the 2022 stuff. Just Stranger Things and some Paradise PD. Some stuff I watched it this year, but it came out last year. Yellow Jackets. Some stuff that was on Amazon Prime, but I did do some calculations for myself. There is an application that I use if you're interested in tracking your TV or looking for new TV shows. It's called TV Time. They have an app, they have a website, and they do offer the statistics that the other websites that I mentioned, Letterboxd and Goodreads, offer, but I'm not up on that one tracking all the time. It gets a bit tedious trying to track each episode. I'll do it for an Amazon series or a Netflix series, because maybe there's only 10 episodes, and if you watch it fairly fast, it's easy. But if you're watching CSI or Blue Bloods, like the shows that I'm watching, and they have 22 episodes, and you're playing catch up, so sometimes I burn through 4 or 5 episodes in a week or a night if I'm really bored, and so it's a bit more tedious to track. So sometimes I'll just finish an entire season or 2 seasons, and then I'll just go on and I'll mark that I watched both of those seasons. But it skews my statistics, right, and it shows you like a whole chunk of data. But I did do my own calculations. So if a season has 22 episodes and the episodes are 40 minutes, and you watch 5 of those seasons, how many hours is it? And I looked up how long Stranger Things season 4 was. It's 13 hours just for season 4 of Stranger Things. And so if you did the 4 seasons of CSI, 4 seasons of Blue Bloods, a handful of episodes of The Flash, it adds up very quickly. It's 157 hours. So if you add all of those up, all 3 of those categories now, movies, 310 hours, and you add up books between 96 and 120 hours, because it was, like I said, 8 to 10 hours per book, and you do 157, we'll say 157 plus in parentheses, and you add that up, it's 565 hours to 589 hours, 23 to 24 days of media consumption in 2022. That was my total final tally of how much time I spent watching movies, reading books, and watching TV shows. And it's not that bad, considering it's one of the things I enjoy doing. You know, I really enjoy this podcast, and rewatching the same movie, having to, you know, sit there and take notes and watch the behind the scenes. I think I've found a creative outlet that allows me to use my passion for movies and for all of these different forms of media, and I can produce something that's enjoyable, I hope, for people to listen to, and gives me a sense of pride knowing that I created something and I put something out there from all these hours of media and stuff. I will mention that I did gather the statistics from my smartwatch. I have a Galaxy smartwatch, and I did do 125 hours of activity, walking, cycling, working out this year. I did do 5 times more in terms of just sitting around and doing nothing. But I will say that in 2023, I do have a goal of doubling, by a minimum of doubling my activity hours. So a minimum of 250 hours for 2023. Because like I said at the top of the episode, I'm about goals, and I think goals are important in life. It's important to strive for something, aim for something, be motivated towards something, accomplishing something, and then at the end of, you know, however long the period is, whatever you define, it could be longer than a year. Maybe your goals are a bit longer, they're a bit more lofty, you have more to attain for your goal. But it's something to take stock in, look back in. It's part of the reason why I journal. It plays into why I love doing the podcast, having these episodes to look back on and looking at what I've accomplished and the effort and the work that I put into each and every episode. So I just love goals. I'm a goal-oriented person in that aspect. Personal goals, workplace goals, hobby goals, stuff. Just all of the above, and they can be such a variety of goals. Like they could be self-improvement goals, putting yourself out there goals, just all sorts of things. And for me, a lot of them are, reading and viewing different types of media. And like I'll give you an example. My reading challenge for 2023 is going to be 15 books again, but I'm going to have like a sub goal, and I want at least half of those books. So it's an odd number, but at least half. So 7 books. I want them to be nonfiction. So I want to read more nonfiction about history, economics, government. I want to be a bit more active in those roles. Another goal of mine is I want to learn more about my country, the government, the way the economy works, politics. I'm almost 30, and so one of my goals for this year is to learn more about those topics. And then I'm gonna, I can use my other goal of reading, and I can kind of combine those. I want to learn more and I want to read more, so I'll combine and I'll learn while I read. It's a good avenue, and maybe I'll watch some movies that are historic events in politics, government, or history of Canada. I'm from Canada. If you weren't aware of that. And that plays right into my movie goal for 2023. It's still 200 movies. I want to watch 200 movies in a year. I don't think I'll be able to push it past 200 movies. Probably like even in 2024, you get to a point where you would have to be watching literally a movie a day. If you get up into like the 300s, there's only so much time in a year. So probably stick around 200. But like I said, for the reading goal, I'm going to have like a sub goal. So the sub goal for my movie goal this year is to watch more classic movies, critically acclaimed movies, movies from different eras of filmmaking. Just gonna look up a lot of lists, some maybe go by director, go by popular opinion, take in some other people's views on the classics, and what people have thought are different classic movies through the ages, kind of thing. There's always you're having discussions about films, and there'll be a movie that I say I haven't seen, and often the response is, "You haven't seen that? Why are you watching Little Nicky and The Day After Tomorrow for the 10th time, but you still haven't seen this pinnacle of film?" And in the back of my mind, I know, it's a deep-rooted shame of being a film buff that hasn't seen all the classics, and there's so much coming out and so much new content and things you want to go see in theaters. And then, if you're reading comic books and playing video games and doing all the fun things that nerds do, playing D&D, working on a podcast, there are only 500 hours to devote, if that's how many hours I'm devoting. Well, that's by the book, that's how many hours I've calculated and crunched. So that's my goal for 2023, is to definitely diversify, and that's where a lot of my goals stem from, is about broadening my horizons and my knowledge pool. And a lot of movies are inspired by each other, so the farther you go back and the more you watch, the more you understand. I love watching an old movie and catching a reference or a joke or something that happened in this movie, this older movie, and then it kind of clicks in place with all these other movies that came after it, and I'm like, oh, I get that reference now. I understand where that came from, and that quote and this quip and things like that. It's always fun. It's kind of like when you watch, as a good example, if you watch one of the scary movies, or any of these compilation comedy movies or spoof movies, if you go and look up like what movies did Scary Movie 1 spoof, and then I mentioned this in one of my former podcasts, I went and I watched all of the movies that were spoofed in Scary Movie, and that's really fun because now you understand, you go back and you watch Scary Movie, and there's this entire other element of the movie that you really understand. And the more movies you watch, you kind of pick up on that, and that's something that I really enjoy. And that's where a lot of my goals stem from, is just broadening my horizons on the media and the things that I love. And that's, again, it comes full circle. It goes back into the podcast, and it's all part of the research and the knowledge that I love to have when I sit down to do this podcast, and looking at the behind the scenes and the budgets and the VFX and the technologies that are being used. It's also interesting, and there's so much information there that I personally I love learning about, and I can learn about that all day, and it goes into this podcast, and it comes out in my personality. If you ever have an in-person conversation with me, or if you know me, well, first, thanks for listening to the podcast and putting up with all my nerd conversations. But yeah, I'm definitely somebody that loves to have a conversation, and I hope that translates into this podcast. But that's just a bit about my goals and about what I've enjoyed in 2022 and what I look forward to in 2023, and my aspirations and goals in relation to media and consuming all of this amazing entertainment that is created. Just for us, it's created for profit. Obviously, that plays into it, but at the end of the day, it's also created for the people who enjoy it and are willing to spend their money on it. And there's this fan service that's becoming very popular that I've mentioned it in previous episodes, that Disney does so well. Going online and listening to comments and reading comments and feedback and critique from the fans, and then going and putting it in the movies and giving little nods and acknowledgments to fans like myself is something that is greatly appreciated. And it goes the extra mile in whether or not I decide to spend my money on this property, this movie, this superhero, this blockbuster, or whatever it has, comic book, TV show, video game, whatever it may be, that it's appreciated in the long run. And it's a great time to be a nerd, and it's a great time to be enjoying all of the entertainment that is being created, because a lot of it is cutting edge, like Avatar or the new video games that are coming out in 2023. Definitely looking forward to a bunch of the new video games. The new Hogwarts Legacies game, there's the new Starfield game from Bethesda. I'm playing the new High on Life game from the creators of Rick and Morty, where your gun, It's a first-person shooter where your gun is alive. If you follow me on Twitter at @the_nerd_review, maybe you've seen the videos I've been sharing, the posts I've made about High on Life. You can drop me a line there. You can send me a comment. You can request a movie. You can request a theme for an episode. I am totally open for that. I would love to hear from any of the viewers and the listeners to the show. So yeah, there's so much to look forward to in 2023. There's so many movies coming out. The Mario Brothers movie. I could go on about all of the things to look forward to for an entire extra episode. But let's move on. Let's continue the flow of this episode. So it is, in fact, actually New Year's Eve now. It takes a long time to put one of these episodes together. So we have actually transitioned days. At the beginning of the episode, it was not New Year's Eve, but it is now, in fact, New Year's Eve. So in keeping with the tradition of New Year's Eve and holiday episodes, and being that this is a season finale, I was looking at movies that take place on New Year's Eve. Not actually that many. There's a few that are like specifically like called New Year's Eve. There was one from, I believe, around the 2010s that had this huge list of Hollywood actors, A-listers, and it was just a huge bomb. And so I looked for some other movies that maybe take place on New Year's Eve but aren't entirely about New Year's Eve. And it's a short list of movies. Probably the most popular one is Ghostbusters 2, and then Poseidon Adventures, and the remake of Poseidon from the early 2000s. After that, it was Snowpiercer from 2015 with Chris Evans. The whole revolution on the train in that movie takes place on New Year's Eve. If you've seen maybe the Netflix series, you're probably familiar with that story. And then the movie that we're going to talk about for the end of this episode, the movie that I just watched, which again is kind of New Year's Eve adjacent, is Money Train from 1995, starring Wesley Snipes and Woody Harrelson and Jennifer Lopez in her fourth movie. So when I read about it, it was kind of described as a heist movie. I went in thinking it's a heist movie that's like around New Year's Eve, and it's definitely more of an action comedy. It's kind of like a buddy cop comedy with a rom-com twist that also has a heist at the end, and I mean the end because the heist is like the last 20 minutes of the movie. And so it was an okay movie. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars on Letterboxd, the website that I was talking about earlier, the website where I review and catalog all of my movies. The cast carries the movie, definitely. The writing is it's decent. The jokes are funny, but definitely Woody Harrelson, he brings life to his character, and the performances of Jennifer Lopez and Wesley Snipes, they carry the movie for sure. If they had have gotten lesser known actors and actresses, it would have been more of a B movie that nobody really remembers, but the cast did an amazing job, and they sold that movie. So unfortunately, it was undersold in that respect. It had a $68 million budget, presumably for all the train sequences and explosions at the end of the film. Pretty pricey for a movie that just bombed, and it only brought in $72 million at the box offices. And if you add in, like we've mentioned, the budgets for advertising typically aren't included in the budgets that are made at like Public and stuff. So if you add that in, they probably spent closer to like $75 million on the movie, and to only bring in $77 million, it's classified as a bomb. And but there were some interesting behind the scenes and interviews with some of the actors and stuff. There's an interview with Jennifer Lopez. This was her first big love scene. She has a love scene in the movie with Wesley Snipes' character, and that was there's a love triangle going on. It's a little bit of a rom-com, as I said, between Wesley Snipes, Woody Harrelson, and Jennifer Lopez's character. She's the new cop on their transit squad, and everybody is kind of taken with her, and she falls for Wesley Snipes' character, and they get together through about halfway through the movie, and there's a very hot and steamy love scene between the two, very well captured. And in this interview with Jennifer Lopez, she explained this was her first love scene like this. She's done, in her words, she'd done heavy petting, she'd done heavy make-out scenes and stuff like this, but never a, all clothes off, full contact between the actors. And so she looked to one of her mentors for some advice, and they said, you need to get the sex pillow. And she had to have this explained to her. And then when she asked the production of Money Train for this sex pillow, she then had to re-explain it to them because they had no idea what she was talking about. And so, I had no idea what she was talking about. So a sex pillow is something that they craft to your body sizes that you put in between your crotches, basically, to keep contact away, so you have minimal contact. And according to Jennifer Lopez in this interview, everybody gets the sex pillow. She uses it for all of her scenes, so there's no contact between, below the waist kind of thing. And they made varying sizes to get the right fit. And she was laughing. She would ask for I need number 3, and they would throw her the largest model so that to put in between her and Wesley Snipes. And I was just laughing, making a movie, when you do stuff like that, it must be, you gotta take off all your clothes or the majority of your clothes and simulate sex with your colleague. I go to work every day, and it's such a, how do you, and to perform acting, to act in that way and give a believable performance. I don't know how you would do it with a straight face and not just be laughing, and there's all these people around you, and it's a set. It's a pinnacle. It's something that really shows professionalism to be able to do this intimate scene with a colleague. And the sex pillow and all of these anecdotes behind the scenes are just so interesting and hilarious. This goes into what I was saying before, that it's part of the reason why I love doing the research and watching these interviews. It's so funny, and it's so interesting to know all of these things that the production, the crew, and the costume department, I guess, has to create this sex pillow, this foam pillow that, it also has to be comfortable, and it has to be shaped to both people. There has to be a male female, male male side, depending on the performers in the scene. It has to kind of be sculpted to each side of their body so that it fits, or it's just memory foam. I don't even know. I'm just going down the rabbit hole on what this sex pillow thing is at this point. So to get out of that rabbit hole, let's move on to critical response. It got 22% from critics. It got 29% from the audiences. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. It was a good movie. I was a bit misled. The website that I found it on was a New Year's Eve list of movies, and it's kind of New Year's Eve adjacent. The last 20 minutes of the movie have kind of to do it. It is New Year's Eve for the last 20 minutes of the movie, but it has really no impact on the movie. It could have been any other time during the holidays. And interestingly enough, the Money Train is a real thing. It was retired in 2005. It doesn't look like the one in the movie. They modified a different kind of train car and added security bars and made it look like it was all stainless steel. The Money Train, the purpose, it was to take all of the coins and paper money that was used to buy train fare. It got replaced by electronic fare and transit cards. So that's an interesting thing. The one that was used in the movie was actually donated to the Transit Museum in New York. I'm not sure if it's still on display, but that was interesting. I enjoyed the movie. It's not as action and as good as Lethal Weapon. It's not as funny as a Rush Hour. I kind of put it right in between. 3 out of 5 stars is where it fell on my list. Like I said, maybe miscategorized on that website that I watched it on. But other than that, it was a decent movie where the cast carries maybe a bit of a lesser plot, a lesser written movie. But other than that, it was enjoyable. So that's a movie that I'll put in the bag as one of the final movies of 2022. The final movie of 2022 for me is actually, funnily enough, will be the new Black Panther movie. I have a ticket to see it tonight on New Year's Eve at 10:25 p.m. The movie's 2 hours and 40 minutes, so I will actually bring in the new year while watching my last movie of 2022. And I mean, technically the first movie of 2023, because I'll be watching it for an hour. So when I review it, I guess I'll have to select the 31st is when I sat down to watch it, but it will definitely end on the 1st of January. So that's kind of funny. It'll be the last and the first movie that I watch, and I will bring in the new year doing what I love, watching movies with my family and my girlfriend, and we're going to be going for a nice dinner before that, so there is a very real possibility that we fall asleep while watching that movie. And right now we're the only people who have pre-bought our tickets for the 10:30 showing of a movie on New Year's Eve. So I do give a big shout out and appreciation to all of the people who are working at this movie theater, because they are working on New Year's Eve through New Year's Eve into the new year, so that I can go watch a movie with my family. And I appreciate their hard work, and I appreciate everybody who's listened to season 1. This has been the season finale of season 1 of the Nerd Review. I really appreciate everybody who's supported me and supported this podcast, and all my listeners, and all the critical response and reviews that I've gotten. I have dedicated to improving and really listen to what people said, and I put in a lot of effort into every episode, and I hope that shows. I hope you've enjoyed every episode. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I really hope you come back for season 2. I'm going to be taking a little bit of a break. I'll probably be coming back towards the end of January. I'm going to put together an outline and plot some episodes, and I have goals, just like I have goals for everything else. I have goals for the Nerd Review, and that is to keep coming and creating content that people can enjoy, that I can be proud of. So without getting too gushy and without getting too nostalgic about the year that has passed, I hope everybody has a great New Year's. Happy New Year from the Nerd at the Nerd Review, and I hope you've enjoyed season 1, and I hope everybody comes back for season 2. So this has been the season finale of season 1. This is episode 18 of the Nerd Review. This is the Nerd signing off, December 31st, 2022. Happy New Year, everyone.